Om Brahmanandam Paramasukharam Kevalam Gyanamurtim Dandoititam Gaganasadrisham Tattvamashadi Laksham Ekam Nityam Bimalamatchalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tan Namami. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. We salute the leader of our souls, through whose grace our ignorance is dispelled, who is beyond good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, and all other pairs of opposites. We recognize that one as the only witness to the changing phenomena of this universe. May we through that grace go beyond darkness and illusion and realize the truth in this very life. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. We welcome you here, live streaming audience, and to those who have gathered this morning after early meditation at 6 a.m. at the SRV Ashrama. And we are beginning our Sunday with Satsang, and it is live streamed, and this afternoon's class also on Tibetan Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta will be live streamed. Last week we were not live streamed because we were on retreat, Zen Buddhist retreat here at the ashram, and taking the teachings of Mother India as she manifested herself through wisdom, through all the generations, through China into Japan, in the form of Zen. And we had very salient experiences around that retreat, and they continue to feed our meditations. And that's what Satsang is designed to do as well. We want to give humanity every chance to air the questions in their mind, the questions about ordinary life, earthly life, worldly life, conventional life, even weekly religious life can be answered by regular means, but the really pressing questions, the deep inner queries that come up in the mind when it's in the throes of its deepest contemplations, are rarely spoken and also have a hard time finding answers in the world. So questions like the 5 W's, where, what, when, why, and who, we tend to take deeply, and that means basically time, space, causality, name, and form. Or, as in Sanskrit it's called, desha, kala, nimitta, nama, and rupa. So those are questions that, if they're taken from the standpoint of spirituality, that is, if they're not just taken at the scientific level or at the psychological level, but taken into the deep recesses of consciousness, higher awareness, they provide very good mead for consideration, very good food for thought, for deeper thought. And that kind of thought enlightens the mind by degrees and stages. Enlightenment always dawns on the mind in stages, says Sri Ramchandra in the Adhyatma Ramayana. So in Satsang, Sat Truth, Sangha, a group that gathers together, we all come together via modern technology, thankfully, from different places around the globe into this one little space here at our ashram, at the eternal and never-changing moment. That is, we can sit together and take up these deep questions of spiritual life and find specific answers for them. We find that it's a process that goes deeper and deeper, and as if question and answer are just sort of a prompter. And then all of a sudden you can find yourself diving deep into discourses and wisdom transmission. The churner of the ocean of nectar, we might call satsang. That's one of the beads on your mala is called the churner of the ocean of nectar. And each bead on the mala represents something very specific. So again, spiritual life and all of its concomitants take us very deep in consideration and give us lots of room for taking time and space and causation to a deeper level, until finally they disappear or show themselves up as attributes of the mind. When the mind goes into deep sleep at night, time and space tend to shrink and go away. We've noticed in our meditations as well, time and space tend to break down. And so one of the great songs of India says that, practice meditation and cut time down, and cut space away, and try and cut cause and effect, which affectionately or inaffectionately known as karma. Cut that away too, and rest in that one single moment, as we are doing here with you this morning at our satsang. And questions have already come in and been listed. I've had a chance to glance at them this morning at just before meditation, and they have come in the number of 5 from 5 different students. Some here, one in California, one in Oregon, and the rest I think right here in Hawaii. So let's take these questions right in order. The first question written in is, if disease is born of the mind, then isn't medicine also born of the mind? How does scientific medicine work on our bodies? Does it really manage the prana? So basically there are 3 questions there in one. And I would say to start off that there are many things that are there in the mind. Everything comes out of the mind. So first we'd have to start off with that idea that the universe is just mind made manifest, as the earliest teachings back to Lord Vashishta tell us, that everything is a thought concretized. That is, trees and oceans and everything start off as thoughts in the mind. That's called mind-only school teachings, and of course they differ from creationist theories, and they differ from scientific theories that seek physical origins only. We seek the origin of everything back in the mind. Like I said, when we wake up out of deep sleep, we've broken down the dreaming state and we've entered the waking state, and when we go back into deep sleep, we break down both the waking and the dreaming state. There's a question about that later that will be answered. So the mind is always fashioning and unfashioning, constructing and tearing down worlds of name and form and time and space based on cosmic principles that all exist back in the mind at individual levels, at collective level, and also at cosmic level. We have to make sure that we take the mind at that level of Triputty, 3 levels of mind. And so when one looks at the mind, they see that there are many things that have come out of the mind that really don't get our attention. But illness isn't one of those. Illness gets our attention right away. So it's a prime subject for the beginning aspirant in spirituality. An advanced or intermediate or advanced aspirant begins to get over the question of disease and remedies. Solutions and remedies begin to become much less problem. In fact, they begin to pull the mind into relativity and keep it there. So they start to lean more toward that transcendental area where higher thought preoccupies the mind. Wisdom teachings, we call it Dharma, and like we studied last week in Zen Buddhism and in Tibetan Buddhism this afternoon, the Dharma is prevalent in all Indian darshanas, and it grabs the mind, and if it's utilized right, it'll cause the mind to become one-pointed. That's called the wisdom eye, by the way. Krishna called it Jnana Chakshu, the eye of wisdom, and Christ called it, if thine eye be single, you shall know the truth. And I've found references to the single eye or the single eye of wisdom in about 7 different religious traditions. So that's what Dharma tends to do. But back at the level of dealing with our illnesses, then the question comes about medicine. And so how does it manage, does it really manage the prana, the question asks. And how does it work on our bodies? Well, short answer would probably be that scientific medicine tends to work on the effects and not on the causes. And in the greatest teachings, the ancient teachings of India, the idea that rebirth is the first disease first comes to the mind. That's a teaching from Lord Vashishta, one of the earliest holistic healers of all times. It was many, many thousand years before Patanjali came along with the yoga system. Everything from his teachings on health to samadhi, everything in between, was a very thorough system that he had systematized it all into 8 limbs and many, many concomitants again. But the idea that that rebirth is the first disease was there prevalent in India at the earliest times. So long before they considered health and ill health, they had made this declaration. Rebirth is the first disease. So that's called sara, essential. And samanya is called secondary. The secondary problem is that when people are born, if they do choose to take birth, and note the words there, we'd rather be choosers than be pulled into life against our will in ignorance. So if we have chosen to take rebirth, then the first problem there is lack of discriminative wisdom. So again, we're back to this idea of dharma and wisdom. If we had learned that in a previous lifetime, then you're born with healthy body, healthy prana. Prana means that energy flowing through you on all levels, and healthy minds. And people who are born otherwise probably did not learn the dharma in a previous lifetime. Generally speaking, there are, of course, many different cases to take up. But generally speaking, managing the prana, as the question says here, is really more the idea. Western medicine tends to try and manipulate the prana without knowing about the existence of the prana. So a lot of us are beginning to lean more towards holistic medicines, which can help the prana, that is, help it in its flow, help it to be free of impedances and blockages that cause problems in our organs and in our nerves and so forth. That in the same way that when prana flows through the nerves, and there's a healthy body, in that same way when Shakti power, which is a much, much finer form of prana, manager of prana, begins to flow through our subtle nerves, those nerves that are inside nerves that can't be seen, then we have healthy spiritual bodies too, and healthy minds. They can think properly and they can act properly. Everything is in harmony then in that sort of a system. So those who tend to take on a body-mind mechanism, as we say in Vedanta, or a psychophysical being, are best equipped in life if they know about discriminative wisdom. If they had learned discriminative wisdom in a previous lifetime, then the problem of illnesses is much attenuated. That's why you see the yogis being well all the time and very seldom get sick, or sometimes the body gets sick, but the mind stays in its healthy state. So in that way, we see that Western medicine has a different idea, treats the body as if the body were real. But we know in spiritual life that the body is going to pass and that it's a manifestation of the mind. The mind is its source, its origin. And it can produce as many bodies as it wants, just like you do in dream state tonight. You can be in many different bodies and destroy that body and create another one and move through the dream state in that way. It's one of the levels of your consciousness. It's called the second world of 3 worlds: waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. So a healthy being then can use the prana so that very little medicines, whether they be allopathic or homeopathic, are needed. And that's the ideal thing, is to manage the prana, to control the prana, to master the prana, which is why you begin breathing exercises in most spiritual traditions in India. Is they want you to even out the breath, and that's, your in-breath is like your waking state, and your held breath is like your dreaming state, and your out-breath is like your deep sleep state, or birth, life, and death. So the breath symbolizes so many things, so many other triple teachings in your being. The A-U-M of the word, Om, and those kinds of teachings are there, the three bodies. So prana left to its own devices and mastered then is of course a superior way, but there are uses for scientific medicine. It's just that it treats the cause of things rather than the effect of things rather than the cause of things, and one can then go to a higher source, one's own willpower, to manage the prana and not have to depend so much upon medicines for every little thing, and be in a more natural state of mind. But the point I'm bringing forward in regard to all three questions is that disease, the first disease, is rebirth. So if we can, number one, either transcend the body and not come back to it again, that's one choice. And number two, if we do come back with discriminative wisdom that we've learned in a previous lifetime. That discriminative wisdom will require you to have mastered the prana, by the way, because there's an upward moving prana that causes your thoughts to soar and be inspired, and causes your intelligence to be revealed, and that jnana, wisdom inside within you. So that kingdom of heaven within you, all of that is based in wisdom. So if you come armed with discriminating wisdom into the body, then you'll be pretty much free of diseases anyway. And any diseases that will come to your body, you'll be able to transcend them. Like the father of yoga says, if you get an illness or something, if the yogi gets an illness, then he never says, I'm sick. He just says, my body caught a disease, caught a cold or whatever, you see. But I'm not that cold, I'm not that disease. So automatically there's a detachment that's built into the process. So that is really leaning towards this prana, the question about prana, which is infusing everything, thoughts, movements, body and its various functions. That prana is an all-important key that we're rather missing in the West in modern times. It's a missing link to not only health physically, but to mastery of mind, control of mind and mastery of mind, and then attainment of realization of truth and higher wisdom. There's another question here. This question says, how can a spiritual aspirant such as myself, who is just learning discrimination and correct spiritual attitude toward the world and towards others, tell when we are fault-finding or merely calling a spade, as the saying goes? Are both an error due to ignorance? So I think the questioner here is asking about viveka, discrimination, and then judging or finding fault. There's a saying by Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi that do not find fault with others, learn to look into your own faults. It was one of her last messages. And so there's that idea about judgment, and then there's the idea about discriminating wisdom. And he asks, are both an error due to ignorance? No, actually, the viveka, or spiritual demonstration, is a flat-out determinator. It's basically, it will solve all questions because of its neutrality. Spiritual discrimination doesn't judge. In other words, the idea of superior and inferior isn't there in spiritual discrimination. Spiritual discrimination is just looking at the situation as it is. Like you say here, calling a spade a spade. So you see everything without judgmentalism, without condescension, and therefore that is the main difference between spiritual discrimination and finding fault. Finding fault will, of course, be something that is a mala, or an imperfection. There's a tantric teaching about the 16 evolutes of Maya. One of them is Tarkika Buddhi, the intellect that finds fault with everything. And you come upon that sometimes in people, that you see the real distinction between spiritual discrimination, which doesn't judge, and then the intellect that's developed a bad habit of finding fault with everything. And that intellect that finds fault with everything never gets any rest. It can't come to any conclusion. It can't eventually rid itself of that habit of finding fault and just accept everything as it is. So spiritual discrimination, we call it viveka, which is, of course, the fine word that Swami Vivekananda took for his monastic name. The bliss of discrimination is superlative and is very, very definitely distinct from fault finding. One has to develop that over time, and like I said, the main element that's missing, that's there in fault finding, is the feeling of superiority and inferiority is gone. Spiritual discrimination is just looking calmly, quietly, with equanimity and balance, called upeksha, at the situation, at the object, at the quality, at the trait, at the characteristic, and just seeing it as it is. It's developing the power to see something as it really is. For instance, if you use it in spiritual life, you look at a tree and you see that the tree's form is not the real tree. And then you look deeper, like science has done, and you see the atomic particle tree, and you see that the tree is a mass of swirling particles. Then that's the next level of spiritual discrimination. But you're not judging it to be negative or positive. The tree doesn't have any fault in it. It just has its outer form and its inner form, and you just see them and you note them. And then with deeper spiritual discrimination, you can look at the Buddha nature tree, or what we call the Atman tree. And that's a third level of its existence that most people would never see. And they would never see it because maybe they had gotten caught in the first level of the tree's existence and the second level of the tree's existence. And they think they have come to the final conclusion. But with their spiritual discrimination intact and going to the deepest level, then they find out that the tree has come out of the mind as a thought. And that's how we just started out this afternoon, this morning's satsang, is that everything has come from the mind. So in that way, you could also say the whole world is full of faults because the mind is full of faults. The whole world is full of beauty because the mind is full of beauty. The whole world is full of perfection because my spiritual discrimination is intact. See, the imperfections are perfect. And that's called acceptance. And when one accepts like that, then the tendency to find fault goes away. So it's a good question coming in from this student. And yes, go ahead and call a spade, and at the same time keep free of that element of superiority and inferiority as far as the ego is concerned. And then the spiritual discrimination will be ripe and ready, and you'll be able to look at anything and see the truth in it to the deepest level, not just on the surface level. Now another question comes in. If one fulfills desires through devoting himself to an illumined soul, can one break the chain of incarnation? Yes. Next question. Of course, fulfilling desires only happens in the Dharma. So that's another way we bring up the teaching of the Dharma, because you can't fulfill your desires in the world, because the world, it's like feeding a fire. You see, if you haven't understood or gathered this discriminating wisdom together yet and used it in the world, then you can't make distinctions like good and bad, or some people, it seems like they don't even know the difference yet between what to do and what not to do. And Krishna marks that in the Gita right out the beginning in the early chapters. Must discriminate between karma, akarma, and vikarma, what to do, what not to do, and how not to do anything at all, how to actually act without creating any karma. Those are three different levels of doing and non-doing. And that will give you again the three levels of a thing that are most efficacious for your health, for your spiritual health and your mental health. Your body will follow along after you have that kind of superlative health in the mind. The body will follow along. So that's why people are born with pure minds, like Sri Sharda Devi, the Holy Mother. I just said Sara means essential. The essential thing you need to know is that birth is the first disease. That's the way Vishishta puts it. So Sara is essential, so she's the essential being. She was born with a pure mind. She's a manifestation of Divine Mother. And so therefore that illumined soul that's born like that doesn't have to contend with a lot of illnesses and problems and imbalances, and whether they be of the body or the prana or the mind or the spirit, they're all gone. They're born with a pure mind. So we'd like to try to maintain that pure mind, because then everything else will follow as a matter of course. There again, you could say the difference between scientific medicines and psychology in the Western sense, working from the outside in, and the idea of being born with a pure mind, having everything under control before you set up your life. It's called conscious rebirth. So back to this question, yes, one of the ways, and one of the ways which most people use, Christianity calls it you get to the Father through the Son, is to follow an illumined soul, like an incarnation, a divine incarnation called an avatar, or a great soul, and devote yourself to that Ishvara soul. It's called Ishvara, means the chosen ideal. So you devote yourself to that soul and you think about him or her, Sri Ramakrishna or Holy Mother in our case, day and night, and you offer all your actions into that. I see the next question has to do with sacrifice, so that plays in here. You offer all your actions and all your thoughts and all your deeds into that great cause of all things, that great Ishvara, God with form, sometimes they call it. And therefore your mind, body, and actions get purified by degrees as you do that. You have a higher ideal, and that higher ideal begins to become you. And that happens through dedication, through devotion, as it said here, and that's one of the best ways of attenuating or neutralizing one's desires, or if you wish, fulfilling one's desires. There are about 9 different ways to deal with desire according to our tradition, and 3 of them are impossible. That is, they don't work. One of those is trying to fulfill yourself in the world, because the world is empty of fulfillment. People don't learn that for a long time, sometimes many lifetimes, but in one lifetime, if you learn that lesson that the world can't fulfill you, that all fulfillment is actually in you and your soul, and the world has also come out of you and your soul, out of your mind soul, that is, then you'll have made a huge step in spiritual progress just with that one realization alone. So that can be brought to bear quicker by dedicating yourself to a Ishvara, to an illumined being. What Buddha is to the Buddhists, and Christ is to the Christians, and Krishna is to the Hindus, and Muhammad is to the Muslims, and so forth. That represents an ideal for millions of people. And those are all facets in one gem called Almighty Father, or Brahman, or Allah, Buddha nature. And those are all doorways and pathways leading to peace. Everyone talked about peace. Muhammad, may peace be upon him. Jesus Christ, peace. The Hindus, peace 3 times. See? So everyone's interested in peace. Holy Mother, you need peace of mind first and foremost. So how can you fulfill your desires if you haven't got peace of mind? They will just continue to come back at you, and you'll attempt to spin your wheels and try and satisfy yourself in the world. But when you learn that one lesson, then that desires are only satisfied within, then one of those routes that you take within is towards Ishvara, the highest ideal. And you offer everything that you desire and everything that you want to attain to that Ishvara form. It's like one of the beautiful charts here on our wall of our ashram is you start the day waking consciously, then you purify yourself with water, bath, ritual, then you prostrate before the altar, that is before Ishvara, the God with form, then you sit and you chant Om to set up your mind. The eternal word Om will all of a sudden usher you into all 24 cosmic principles have come out of Om. Everything has come out of Om. And then finally when your mind is set, then you pray for fulfillment. See, that is actually offering your desires to God right there. May you grant me exactly what I need, not what I want, but what I need. And then you put everything in the hands of your Ishtam, your chosen ideal. You know what's best for me, just like a child puts everything in the hands of his father and mother and doesn't know yet what's best for him. And then you offer your life to God, called Samarpana. That has to do with sacrifice and so forth. And then Purusha Yagya, you dedicate the soul to God. Finally, you salute your gurus, all your gurus on all sides, your teachers, and then you end up with a vow to infuse your sadhana with enthusiasm, utsaha. So that keeps your spiritual life living, full of verve, full of energy, and you rededicate yourself every day anew that way. Even during the day, if you begin to flag, or at nighttime before you go to bed, you keep that vow to infuse your sadhana with enthusiasm. Utsaha means enthusiasm.
Then should one meditate after that?
Yes, and then one meditates. It's a 9-point method for setting yourself up for meditation, and it could all be done in 10-15 minutes actually. It's not like something you have to take a long time to do, but once you get the order down, then you spend a few minutes on each one of those things. Rise, wash your hands and face, sit, and go through the whole process. And then you've dedicated yourself rightly, it's right perspective, like the Eightfold Path, and then you sit in meditation at that point, and you do your japa, your mala, with your beads, as we were saying, and meditate on God with form. And then you leave some time open when your mind is very calm and quiet to meditate on God beyond form. So it's a very comprehensive and complete way of approaching and activating your spiritual life, leading a dharmic life in the world. And there again, it's all based upon this dharma. So you fulfill your desires in the dharma, and you offer yourself to your highest ideal, and that is the way to God through form. Get to the Father through the Son. And that leads into the next question. The question is, many times over the years, I've heard you speak of yagya, sacrifice. I know that it is important to live one's life as a sacrifice, and whenever I see someone who is actually living this way, it is always inspiring. In the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says, I alone am adiyagya here in the body. In the commentary on the same verse, Swami Chidbhavananda makes these beautiful statements. Wherever adiyagya takes place, the presence of the Lord is patent there. And this is due to their having made oblation of themselves into the sacrificial fire of Ishvara, as we were just talking about. This is the sublimest act that a human being can ever do. So he cites the path of Ishvara as being the highest path of God with form. Then the question completes, please speak on a deeper level, inner meaning of sacrifice, the appropriate way we should have our place and relationship within the world, and how we can learn to live and understand this Dharma more deeply. Well, that could of course take hours and hours if I were to speak deeply on it, but in the time that we have remaining for us this morning, and one more question we have to answer, we could say that one probably should take up the Gita and read about the storehouse of Vedic sacrifices, because Sri Krishna pretty much reads the riot act on it and gives you a whole list of kinds of sacrifices which people have been known to do. And all of them are dharmic at least, and some of them are even transdharmic, that is swadharmic. Some, like as mentioned here in the Gita, give themselves to Ishvara completely, that's it. They just put their whole self into the hands of their ideal. A good way of example would be Sri Ramakrishna giving himself entirely to Mother Kali. And because he did that and attained her, then he could understand all religions and all languages. That is, all the languages of the spirit were open to him because he had given himself to Divine Mother Kali and put himself 100% in her hands. Sometimes he said 120%. So he lived in her, thought about her, did a 12-year sadhana that included concentration upon her, and held her as his chosen ideal. Ishvara in this case means Ishvari. The feminine form would be his ideal in Mother Kali. Although Mother Kali, of course, transcends male and female, so eventually you'll get beyond that duality too. But the form is still there, but it's the subtlemost form. So it's not an impediment, and it's not a crutch or any of these things people, pseudo-Advaitas, talk about. You see, it's very, very well beaten path to salvation. Salvation at least, and they say that if you get to the Father through the Son, you go from salvation to liberation, and you know your formless essence. Coming back free of disease is one thing, but knowing your formless essence that is always diseaseless, where disease has no place, is of course an entirely different thing. So the difference between salvation and liberation is marked there in the Indian scriptures. It's a good distinction to make. That's where you're using your discrimination. You don't need to find fault with salvation. You just need to discriminate higher and find that there's something called liberation. But salvation is a beaten path. Like, for instance, Holy Mother used to say, people would say, too much rites and rituals going on here in India. And then she would say, but people have been getting to God by rites and rituals for thousands of years, and you mean to take them away from them? So until you can float in space, that is, until you don't need any ground to stand on, and that takes a lot of doing, then you need to have God with form. But as soon as you can float away into your formless nature and you feel comfortable doing that, then you can take the rug out from under people, the rug of God with form, but not until. And besides, you've seen this world, how many millions, billions of souls are coming into it and leaving it. It seems like this world is here to stay as a transitional place between ancestors and humans, and of course animals and insects and other forms of life too are always coming in and out of this world. So it seems to me the path with God with form towards salvation is always going to be there. It's one of the eternal paths. Maybe that's why Krishna talks about the path of the sun and the path of the moon in the Gita as the two eternal paths. Eternal paths mean they're both always going to be there. So yes, for some of those beings who are superlative seekers and who reach the highest state, they may prefer to go formless and stay formless, but even they will have to come back into form to help others. Therefore, you want to do it with discriminating wisdom. You see how these questions then connect. Any question in satsang connects. If you have the eye to see, you see, and then you make the connections and you believe in the Dharma. You become a supporter of the Dharma. You never are a detractor of the Dharma. You always support it, and you support the teachers who teach it. There are other sacrifices to make besides the sacrifice into Ishvara. Some people aren't ready yet to give themselves, their ego over, for whatever reasons, and there are many. You can offer then the senses into the sacrificial fire. Everything you see, taste, touch, hear, and smell, you make an offering of it. That's one of the sacrifices in the Gita, in the Vedic storehouse. And they even specify the act of hearing. Because hearing is the subtlest of all senses in our tradition. Hearing goes with ether, and ether is the subtlest element. So sight goes with fire, right? So that's third on the list. See, but that superlative sense of hearing is connected to the truth, connected to wisdom, is connected to the Dharma, connected to the ethers and the vibrations that are passing back and forth between teacher, preceptor, and disciple or student. So that being the subtlemost, then you can offer the sense of hearing, all sound, into God as a sacrificial fire. See? Other people offer their food. Krishna says in that same chapter, you should read it, about the storehouse of Vedic sacrifices. Some people offer their food. So before they eat, as they take the food, and after the food, they'll offer their food back into Brahman. That's a fairly common sacrifice, but sometimes it doesn't go very deep. See, if you just sit there at the table and say, "Thank you, God, for this food," and then start eating, and that's all you do, then you've missed many, many different levels of offering the food, many benefit you get from making food a sacrifice into Brahman. As you're eating it, as you're digesting it, the energy the mind gets from eating food can then contemplate higher teachings. You can't contemplate higher teachings if you're weak, if your food isn't pure, you don't get the right energy from it. And a lot of people suffer from that. Even people who have said, "Thank you, God, for the food," suffer from no spiritual energy. They think about anything, it makes them tired. Just to think about it makes them tired. What to speak of doing it? So you need to get into the mind as if it were a weed bed and just attack it and take it completely out, like I saw my nephew do a couple days ago. So that mind needs weeding. So you need energy for that. And so that's one of the great sacrifices, is offering your food. So do it at a deep level and know how food is Brahman, as another famous sloka in the Gita says, Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagnao Brahmanahutam, that all is Brahman and it begins with food. So that's a very deep level of knowing of the sacrifice of food. So there are many kinds of sacrifices in the Bhagavad Gita, and other places too are mentioned. Some people, in fact, Krishna says at one point, the highest of all sacrifices is wisdom sacrifice. So some people study, read the scriptures, digest the scriptures, contemplate the scriptures, meditate on the scriptures and the teachings and the Dharma, and they offer that back to Mother. And she tends to like that, I hear. See? Sri Ramakrishna, that was one of his great sacrifices too. So all of these wisdom sacrifices all are very important too. That, of course, brings back the import of the Dharma. We could go on and on about that, but yes, to conclude, people who live a sanctified life of sacrifice are very admirable. You could call them acharyas, swamis, roshis, ajaris, tulkus, priests and other holy beings, sages, seers, and saints. They tend to live that life of sacrifice all the time. So for them it's not a matter of accumulating, it's a matter of being free of things. So they're always, what they do get, they give back. Because that's kind of a simple definition for sacrifice. What you receive, give it back. And then you'll receive it many more fold, Christ says. And then you give that back too. So the idea isn't to accumulate and end up with a huge amount. You must end up neutral. You must end up not with too much or too little. You just must end with just what you started with, which is perfect.
So that's the way to neutralize karma?
Yes, it can be connected to karma. because sacrifice will attenuate your karmas. Your karmas many of them are happening to people because of greed and selfishness and accumulation of goods and wealth. Trying to own things that are empty. I own acres of forest, but I just told you the teaching of the tree, it's empty. There's nothing there. You own a bunch of emptiness. So accumulating things is very sketchy and very, very tentative and very risky. So if you know the truth, then even if you own a lot, you won't own it. See, you'll custodian it, they say, but you'll never consider it to be yours. It cannot be owned. Even our American Indians here on this continent practiced that kind of sacrifice. They moved about freely. They didn't try and own anything. It'd be like trying to own the sky. It goes on and on forever. Same with the land and the waters. Troubles come, karmas come by trying to take those and keep them and steal them and hold them and give them away, like God does. Gives everything away freely, see, like Divine Mother. So we could go on and on about how we can learn to live and understand that Dharma more deeply. That's actually what we're doing here, so let's do it. Let's keep going on. Last question here in our remaining time is, there is a chart that was created on the three bodies of the non-self, according to Shankaracharya. It says that the waking state facilitates both dream and deep sleep states. The waking state certainly fuels dream by creating experiences and tendencies for mind to chew on, as it were. But how does it facilitate deep sleep, which is a state of formlessness? My question is further prompted due to the fact that it is the causal body that is the cause of the subtle and gross bodies. If it is the cause of the gross body, why does it need the gross body to facilitate it? It sounds very chicken and eggish. Well, yeah, but more than that, this teaching of the three bodies is coming from the Vivekachudamani by Shankaracharya. And there, the idea is that the waking state then creates the dreaming state and then the deep sleep state. And she's saying, the questioner is saying here that basically deep sleep comes first, and then dreaming comes out of that, and waking state comes out of that from source of origin. They call it evolution. But so if you're looking at it in two different ways, Shankaracharya, when he talks about the three bodies in the Vivekachudamani, he's talking about it in terms of the cause, in terms of the practice, the practitioner. Practitioner goes from waking, dreaming to deep sleep. So for him or her, practitioner, sadhaka, that's the way it proceeds. Their waking state first, then their dreaming state, and then their deep sleep state, like the AUM of Om. You have to start out with a practice. But from the standpoint of cosmology, it's the other way around. It's cause first, subtlemost cause called causal, then subtle, and then gross. So you have to look at it in terms of those two perspectives. One from the standpoint of the practitioner who's trying to understand the tattvas, and they'll start out with the waking state and everything that's in it, meditate on that, and then go to the dreaming state and find out that that is actually the cause of the waking state. But to the practitioner, he's proceeding from waking to dreaming, from dreaming to deep sleep. He's trying to master the A of Om first, then the U of Om, and then the M of Om, and then go beyond the three worlds. Those are called the three worlds, or the three states of your consciousness. Waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Remember, there's something called Turiya, the fourth, which is represented by that little one-eyed smile there, that called the Shvara, that half moon on its back with the dot. In the Sanskrit symbols called Shvara. If you make a domino Om, see, and you have the kids knock that down, everything will fall down except the Shvara. So that remains untouched. That's beyond the three worlds, beyond the three states, it's beyond the three bodies. It's your true nature, and that's what we're all trying to realize. But we'll have to do it by understanding the cosmology first From the causal comes the subtle, and from the subtle comes the gross. And then we'll have to go the other direction, from outside in, and prove to ourselves that we can get from waking the gross body into our dream state, and then into our causal state, and that's called involution. So evolution and involution is always going on so long as the soul is transmigrating, taking births in different bodies, gross, subtle, and causal. Remember, that's the mind that's doing that. The true soul never moves. And there's where the beauty of Advaita Vedanta, the non-duality they call it, comes in. That's something you should have learned at the very first, the outset, and then you can understand the cosmological process on top of that foundation. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna said, learn this one fact to the young Vivekananda, Narendra, and keep it in your wearing cloth and remind yourself of it every once in a while by taking it out and looking at it. Then go and act, think, participate in life. Go from place to place to help beings out of darkness, out of Maya's veils, as he said in one of his songs. So, if you have that one salient fact, that one superlative fact first, that soul never moves, that soul is all-pervasive and eternal, then you can understand all the movement that's going on, or the apparent movement that's going on top of that foundation, just like waves on the top of an ocean. So, very good question here, but that answers it. Cosmologically speaking, from the inside out, and from the standpoint of involution, or the soul's gathering of wisdom, and its gathering of wisdom in order to get enlightenment, it moves from the outside in. So that has eaten up our time, but we'll always be in self-inquiry as we go out into the world. We'll take these teachings with us and live a life which is beneficial to all beings and to ourselves as well. So here, let's end with that chant. Om Bhadram Karnebihi Shrinayama Devaha Bhadram Pasyema Akshabirya Jatraha Stirai Rangaishtushtuvam Sastanuvir Vyashema Devahitam Yadayuhu Svastina Indra Vrida Shravaha Svastina Pusha Vishwadevaha Svastina Starksho Arishtanemihi Svastino Brihaspatir Dadatu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we see with these eyes what is good and spiritual, and hear with these ears what is noble and uplifting. And may we, while worshipping the Lord and Mother of the universe, live a life which is beneficial to ourselves and to all other beings. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Now we hope to see you all at our live streaming class in approximately 6.5 hours. So aloha and namaste.